nutrition. Tune in to get fit and healthy. It's time to talk about nutrition. Nutrition for your body, your mind, your spirit. It's time to talk about proper exercise, stress relief, eating well, and supplementation to help. Get ready to take charge of your health because your health is your wealth and the wealth of those who care about and love you. It's time for Let's Talk Nutrition with Dr. Michael Garko. Welcome to the show.
And welcome to Let's Talk Nutrition. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you're having a really good day wherever and however you may be listening or watching the show, and whatever you may be doing to stay safe and not get infected with this coronavirus. And I will chat a little bit about it. I always do somewhat, not always. Um, Lately, we've been talking about other things on the show, which is fine, which is great. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time uh, even doing updates, just brief ones. But I'll spend a little time today talking about the virus and where we are. There are interesting developments from a scientific perspective. We're learning more and more about how this virus behaves. It, I think this is the first time that I can remember in my lifetime where we've had such an awareness about how science sometimes works. People often think that science always has the answers. Not necessarily. Oftentimes, we start off not knowing much, and it becomes a journey of exploration, discovery, understanding, and just mere description, just trying to describe what we're experiencing. I recall in my master's program, which was a while back, I had a professor by the name of Keith Jensen, Dr. Keith Jensen, and he had a pretty big influence on me. He had a tragic death, by the way. I'll tell you about that in a second. And I spent 3 years in my master's program. Most spent two because they took the option of just doing courses and not writing a master's thesis. So it took me another year. So I had more time with him. And I'll never forget the first time I ever saw this. He's in the front of the room, and he's got a blackboard or a green board, and he had a piece of chalk in his hand. He turns around, and he writes on the board, description, explanation, prediction. And okay. And he said, this is sort of a summary of what science is trying to do, to describe phenomena. And then once we understand what it is, move to explanation. And the world of explanation is the world of theory, which answers the question why the phenomenon behaves the way it does. And then once you get through that, then you can move to, okay, we know what it is. We know why it does what it does. Now we are in a position to predict what it may do in the future. Description, explanation, prediction. And that was drummed into my head and has stuck. And it turns out that is exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to describe what this virus is. Why does it behave the way it does? And you can't get the theory until you know what it is. And then you can try to predict what will happen. Oftentimes in science, researchers don't have enough descriptive data and they move right to theory. And maybe the theories are weak on top of that, and then they try to predict what's going to happen. And that often doesn't end well. and you get a lot of unevenness in the data and the studies that are done. Physical sciences spent decades, if not hundreds of years, literally just observing empirically, that empiricism is observation, just observing things. Now we know what gravity is. We know what all these different physical phenomena are, only because many decades and again hundreds of years of just trying to describe what it is. And then theories were developed in the physical sciences, and then they were able to predict, even with the weather. It's a science. Meteorology is a science. And the weather's hard to predict because it behavior is odd, as are humans. And in the social sciences, we're trying to predict how people will behave given what we know about human nature, human behavior, attitudes, values, beliefs, and so on. And in the social sciences, there there was not much description as there was in the physical sciences, and they jumped right to explanation, and that ended up being a mess. And one classic example of that was back in the day, the attitudinal research on attitudes was a dumpster fire. Study would come out one day, say this, a study would come out the next day and say that, and would go on and on, all over the lot, because there was not enough understanding of what the thing is. So with this virus, we're trying to make predictions as to what might happen. We have a lot of these forecasting models that are being used out of the University of Washington and so on, that those models are only as good as the data that's put into them. And there's a lot of air floating around in the ether with these models. That's why